It's widely feared that economic fallout from the pandemic will cause severe hardship for many renters and property owners. That could also mean large numbers of distressed properties changing hands at low prices. When that happened in previous downturns, it was a bonanza for speculators with ready cash. But our guest also sees a chance to catch up on needs for affordable housing. He's a real estate attorney who has worked on efforts around homelessness, affordable housing, and community development. We'd like to welcome David Abromowitz. Thank you very much for being with us, David.
Great to be here today, Chris.
I know this is an idea that addresses a worst case scenario, but what about the people who are in these housing units right now? What about them?
Well, let's start with that. So the best policy is to keep people in the homes they're in. And I know there's proposals out there at the state level to provide greater rental assistance. The governor and others have extended a moratorium on evictions through October. And so I really hope that what's described in the proposal I came out with never comes to pass and most people find a way to pay their rent. But all the data tells us that a large number of people, a large percentage of people, especially working class, low and moderate income people, are struggling to keep up with the rent. And in Washington, the extra unemployment insurance has not come through. And so there's going to be a lot of people in September and October who may miss rent payments.
What about the lessons from the last downturns, especially the Great Recessions? We had a lot of vacant units coming on the market. Some of them were good faith home buyers who just had a rough patch, and some of them were fraud and phantom transactions. But who got those units when they were foreclosed on?
Well, I would say even look back 2 downturns ago. We in New England had a downturn in the late 80s, early 90s. And at that time, a lot of what was going into foreclosure were apartment buildings and other properties. And those were ripe for affordable housing groups, community-based organizations to buy up. The government had invested your dollars and my dollars and tax dollars into failed banks and was sitting on a lot of apartments. And community groups were simply outbid by investors with a pile of cash who could come in, buy low in 91, 92. They held on to those properties for a few years and sold them for a really tidy profit in 95, 96. We saw the same thing again in the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, 2010. As you say, it was much more individual homes, condo units being foreclosed on, sometimes small apartment buildings. And again, community groups tried to buy those, but investors with cash came in and snatched those up and have been renting them out or flipping them ever since. So we've had 2 really missed opportunities to add a significant number of affordable apartments for the long term to the housing stock. And my suggestion is that we look ahead. We hopefully don't have that happen, but we prepare for it and we equip community-based organizations with the money and the tools they need to buy up the properties if they come on the market.
It also occurs to me that when these properties go on the market at fire sale prices, they're not being necessarily sold by some mortgage company or bank. I mean, these are often sold by a government-backed agency, aren't they?
Well, we're going to have both situations. So sometimes if it's actually gone into foreclosure or it's a bank that's failed, then it's held by a government agency. A lot of what we're going to see, though, are the smaller buildings. A large percentage of where people live in the Boston area and around the country are in 2 to 4 unit buildings, the triple deckers we have all over, and then smaller apartment buildings that you see in every community, the 5 to 50 unit ones. Those are largely owned by what we call mom and pop type landlords, not big professional landlords, but a couple or a family that's pulled together 10, 20 units. And typically when they go into foreclosure, they're working with their local bank and just trying to get out from under it. And that's at least half of the rental apartments around this area are held by those type of landlords.
Well, you can see here the potential to start a cycle of flipping for speculators with cash. I can also see a chance for a community development corporation to come in, buy very cheap, resell at least a break-even amount, and help people with affordable housing. Why isn't that second scenario happening so easily?
Well, there are some efforts. I would say there are some efforts by some of the city and state agencies to make money available, but there's a lot of competition for scarce affordable housing dollars currently. Um, Massachusetts and Boston have been in an effort to build our way ahead of the demand for affordable housing. We have a large gap in need between what's existing affordable properties and the need. We have a lot of older affordable properties that are coming up at the end of their subsidies, and we need to allocate a lot of the public subsidy to preserve them. So what I think is needed is really a new source of money. You know, at the federal level, the Treasury can borrow at 0.5% or a little more for the long term. And now's a real time to sort of stretch the publicly available money. Congress can appropriate some money for a portion of COVID relief, because this is all driven by the pandemic, to come up with some new money so that when these properties come on the market, community-based organizations, nonprofits, CDCs, have the cash in hand to be on a level playing field with the for-profit market.
And I imagine if the government put this money up front, they could get some of it back too, couldn't they?
Yeah, what happens over the life of a property like this is, and you were saying earlier, you know, these might come at bargain basement prices. Well, they might even come at just slight discounts from what they had been. But almost always in the history of affordable housing, if you can buy something at a price today that might even seem a little high, 5 years, 10 years from now, it'll seem like it was a bargain, because prices move ever steadily up. And the good news is, if you can buy with cash today, over the life of it, over 40, 50 years of holding that and preserving that property as affordable, you've built up a stock of stable housing for people, and it pays back the public many, many times over. So it's a really good investment. We just don't have the set aside portion of capital that nonprofits and other community-based groups can really get their hands on and move quickly. Moving quick in this market is a really important part of it, because, like I say, the hedge funds and others come in and they tell a property owner, you know, we can close in 30, 60 days because we've got the cash sitting on our account. And if a nonprofit has to go through an application process and hoops and everything else, it's always going to lose out.
Yeah, you mentioned the nonprofits have some regulatory handicaps. Well, what should be done about that exactly?
Well, I think we tried in the early parts of the last downturn in the Great Recession. Congress created something I had done the blueprint for, called the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, and that built in accountability. People want to know their tax dollars are spent well. They're not wasted. There's no fraud. There's no abuse. But you can go too far with that. You can have too many appraisal requirements. You can have too many preconditions on it. And again, the hedge funds and the vulture funds, they just have all the flexibility in the world. So I think just the balance between making sure the money's spent wisely and giving the nonprofits, the CDCs, quick access to money is there. You know, we have well-developed lending systems. We have public lenders and private lenders that this money can move through. If you just think about when we needed the Paycheck Protection Program a few months ago, and it had its flaws, but moving through the Small Business Administration, banks were able to move billions and billions of dollars out to businesses that need it in 6 weeks. And that money is, you know, preserving jobs and going there. So we need something closer to that for the nonprofit system.
Now, I know with the present crisis, we're not talking about properties that have been going downhill for a long time and which need a lot of work. But I imagine in this sort of a conversion that you're thinking about, there must be some job opportunities for people from Boston too, right?
Yes, I mean, I think generally one of the things that community-based organizations that do affordable housing are good at is they're very good stewards of the housing, and they invest and want to make sure that the housing is up to code, that it's renovated well, and there's going to need to be some money in there. So generally, if a property is coming on the market, the mom and pop owner may not have had the money to keep it up to the standard we would like. So I would see a lot of renovations going along with this, if not, today, certainly over time, as these come into the system. So there'll be some job opportunities, probably some upgrades of systems. A lot of the properties have older, inefficient heating systems, could be weatherized and made energy efficient. So there's a lot of spin-offs to this.
All right. We should thank you very much for joining us and helping us see the potential.
Thank you, Chris. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much, David Abromowitz.